Now that it's 2025, let's go back and take a look at what's happened to the 2015 draft class over the last decade. While there was definitely debate throughout the 2015 season and even leading up to draft night, by the time Minnesota was on the clock with their first overall pick, their selection had become pretty clear. They were going with 6'11" freshman big Karl-Anthony Towns. One of the main reasons there was so much debate is because Towns' production on paper was pretty underwhelming compared to some of the other prospects at the top of the board. He finished the year barely cracking double figures, averaging just 10.3 points to go along with 7 boards and just over 2 blocks. Now those numbers do need some additional context. That Kentucky team was stacked. There were a ton of mouths to feed. Because of that, Towns played far less minutes and had a much smaller share of his team's offense compared to the other players in the top pick conversation. This is something NBA teams and scouts were obviously fully aware of. The sentiment was that what Towns lacked in production, he more than made up for with his potential at the NBA level. Standing at nearly 7 feet tall with a 7'4" wingspan, he had a skill set offensively built for the quickly evolving NBA game. NBA Draft.net said at the time, his offensive game oozes potential with a textbook shooting form, great touch, and an ability to hit outside mid-range jumpers effortlessly and consistently. ESPN deemed him the best balance of risk and reward. They gave the analogy that Towns was the grand slam as opposed to the home run. It wouldn't take long following the draft for it to become very clear that he was the real deal. While he would never even come close to the defender that scouts expected prior to the draft, he had no problems tapping into all that oozing potential on the other side. He took home Rookie of the Year, averaging 18 points and 11 rebounds. By his third season, he was already an all-star, averaging 21 and 12, shooting with incredible efficiency, 55% from the field and 42% from 3. Over the next 6 years, Towns would maintain a pretty similar level of success. However, the same cannot be said for the Timberwolves as a team. That is until this past year, where alongside Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert, Towns would make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. But then just as things were starting to click for Towns in Minnesota, his time there had come to an end. Ahead of this season, he was the main piece of a blockbuster deal that sent him to the New York Knicks. Now luckily, New York was an equally if not more competitive situation. As of right now, the Knicks are the 3rd seed in the East, and Towns has been a key part of that. He's on pace for his best season to date, averaging 25 points and a league-leading 14 rebounds, shooting 55% from the field and 44% from 3. Right now might be the best time of the year for sports, so there really isn't a better time to check out PrizePicks, the sponsor of today's video. It's a sports pick'em platform where all you do is just pick more or less on pretty much any player stat you can think of, and you can now win up to 1,000 times your entry. This weekend, I'm definitely going to be in the lab cooking up some entries. We have NBA, college basketball, the college football playoffs, and the NFL playoffs all going on right now. So if you guys are looking to add a little extra to your viewing experience, or you think you know what will happen and want to test out your knowledge, head over to PrizePicks and make sure when you sign up that you use the promo code JIMMER, and once you play your first entry of at least $5, they're going to hook you up with $50 instantly. As always, keep an eye out as PrizePicks constantly has different promos going on. Thank you PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. The second overall pick in this draft belonged to the Los Angeles Lakers, a team that after 2 decades at the top of the league was entering a new era. Kobe's career was clearly approaching its end, and the team was diving headfirst into a rebuild. They were searching for their next face of the franchise, and many thought their second overall selection in this draft, D'Angelo Russell, had a real chance to be that. The left-handed point guard had elite size at 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan. He was coming off an incredible freshman season at Ohio State, where he averaged 19, 6, and 5 while shooting 41% from 3 on high volume. As far as guard prospects go, it really doesn't get all that much better. But unfortunately, his time in LA didn't go as they hoped. He averaged 13 points, shooting only 41% from the field as a rookie. In year 2, while he would go up to just under 16 points a game, that was on even worse efficiency than the year prior. So when the season came to an end, while Russell clearly still had a lot of long-term potential, the team decided to clear way for their new top pick, Lonzo Ball, and traded D'Angelo Russell to the Brooklyn Nets. He would only play 48 games in his first year there due to injury, but he would break out in 2019. He made his first All-Star appearance, averaging 21 points and 7 assists on career-high efficiency. It looked like he might have found the perfect situation for him. But once again, he was moved to clear way for new additions. The Nets brought in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving during free agency, and D'Angelo Russell was off to Golden State in a sign and trade. He wouldn't even last a full season there before being traded again, this time to Minnesota ahead of the deadline. Over his 2 full seasons there, he would average 18 and 7, shooting 42% from the field. Then at the deadline of the 2023 season, he was on the move again, going back to the Lakers, who were desperately trying to save their season. Something they did. D'Lo was far from the only addition at the deadline, but he was still very key to that turnaround. He finished the year averaging 17 and 6 on 47-39 splits. The Lakers would end up making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, and following the season, re-signed D'Lo to a 2-year deal. This past year, the first year of that contract, it had its ups and downs, but overall, it was solid for Russell individually. He averaged 18 on 46-42 splits. Since then though, things have gone pretty downhill. He ended the season averaging 14 points, shooting 38% from the field during their first round exit of the playoffs. LA then fired their head coach Darvin Ham in favor of JJ Redick, someone who after only 8 games this season, took Russell out of the starting lineup.
Part of like being organized is like knowing what everybody else on the court is going to do, all right?
A move that didn't turn around would have been a rough start. He's averaged just 12 and 5 on 42-33 splits. These struggles led to him being traded to the Brooklyn Nets, once again returning to a former team. So far, he's played 3 games there, posting averages of 13 and 8. The 3rd overall pick has a strong case to be the most interesting spot in this draft to look back at. The selection belonged to the Philadelphia 76ers, who decided to select Duke freshman Jahlil Okafor, a prospect that wasn't just one of the best freshmen, but one of the best players in the entire country. The 6'10" center was nearly unstoppable. He averaged 17 points and 9 rebounds while shooting an absurd 66% from the field. He would eventually go on to lead Duke to a national title. Now, what really makes this spot so interesting looking back is that it really represents a real turning point in draft stock associated with players like Okafor. After his dominant freshman season, it was hard for some to see why scouts had Cat so far ahead of him. But what those people failed to realize at the time was just how big the difference between a player and a prospect was becoming. While clearly Okafor would still come off the board very early in this draft, he was a dying mold. A slow, unimpressive defender who dominates in isolation with his back to the basket, but brings little off the ball and can't spread the floor. Now again, this selection was just the turning point. Despite the rise of teams like Golden State at the time, some still saw a place for Okafor in the league.
I think it's hard to pass on Jahlil Okafor.
I do too.
I think he has so much upside. I think Russell's good, but I think Okafor, if you pass on him, you're going to regret that for a long time.
And early on, it looked like that was the right call. He posted really solid production as a rookie, 18 points and 7 rebounds, shooting 51% from the field. Unfortunately though, the NBA was just moving too quickly, and Okafor didn't have the skill set to keep up. He would go down to 12 points in his second season. By his third, he was completely out of the rotation in Philly and was eventually traded to the Nets. He lasted just a season there before going to New Orleans, where he spent 2 years as a role player, averaging 8 and 4. His most recent stop was with the Pistons in 2021, where he appeared in 27 games, averaging 5 points. Since then, he spent the last 4 years bouncing between the overseas and NBA G League, where he is currently. A part of the Indiana Mad Ants, he's averaging 19 points, 9 rebounds and 4 assists, shooting 65% from the field. Really solid production, but now at nearly 30 years old, his NBA opportunities might have dried up. With the 4th overall pick, the New York Knicks selected Latvian 7'2" center Kristaps Porzingis, a selection that at the time wasn't ideal for at least some Knicks fans.
Recognize that we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived by Phil Jackson and the New York Knicks.
Now that criticism didn't last long at all. He put together a really solid rookie campaign, averaging 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 blocks. He would take the jump that fans were hoping for in year 2, going up to 18 points on much better efficiency. It looked like year 3 was going to be the season that cemented his place as one of the top bigs in the league. Through the first 48 games, he was averaging 23 points, 7 rebounds, and 2.4 blocks, while shooting 40% from distance. Unfortunately though, his ascension would come to a screeching halt, as in a matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks, he would tear his ACL. An injury that not only ruled him out for the rest of that season, but caused him to miss the entirety of the 2019 season. A season that also came with a change of scenery, as Kristaps requested a trade and eventually got his wish, being sent to the Dallas Mavericks to team up with Luka Doncic. Dallas fans were holding their breath leading up to Kristaps's return to the court, but luckily, their concerns were quickly washed away. He picked up right where he left off, averaging 20 and 10. In his second season there, we saw a similar level of box score production, but now on the best efficiency of his career. However, despite the regular season production looking really solid on paper, there were some concerns creeping up when it comes to Porzingis. For one, he had struggled to stay on the court. During that 2021 season, he played in just 47 games. Additionally, come the postseason, Dallas wasn't getting close to the contribution from him they'd come to expect. In their first round loss to the Clippers, he averaged just 13 points and 5 rebounds. So then in the following season, with him struggling to get things going out of the gate, seeing his three-point efficiency collapse to just 28%, the Mavericks decided to make a change, and he was sent to the Washington Wizards. Following the deal, the Mavericks would go on to make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, a feat that at least gave the impression they had made the right call. But that had nothing to do with how Porzingis was playing. In his first full season in Washington, he put together his best statistical season to date, averaging 23 points and 8 rebounds on career-high efficiency. This reinvigorated the sentiment surrounding him, and heading into the 2024 season, the Boston Celtics decided to make a massive move to bring him in. They gave up multiple key assets and also signed him to a new max extension. This move, in combination with the addition of Jrue Holiday, quickly made the Celtics the most dominant team in the league. Porzingis fit right in and finished the year averaging 20 points, 7 assists, and 2 blocks, once again on career-high efficiency. Now, he would end up missing a good portion of the playoffs, but his eventual return was key in Boston bringing home the NBA title. Then to start this season, he would miss the first month or so, but over the last 13 games since returning, he's been averaging 18 and 7. The Orlando Magic were on the clock at 5, who selected another foreign prospect, 6'9" Croatian wing, Mario Hezonja. At the time of this draft, Hezonja was definitely not one of the bigger names amongst fans. However, in NBA circles, there was a ton of praise surrounding him as a prospect. He was coming off his second season playing with Barcelona, one of the top professional organizations in the world outside of the NBA. Bleacher Report had dubbed him the best shooting guard out of Europe since Dražan Petrovic. His shooting stroke, handle, and athleticism have routinely captured the imaginations of scouts and NBA teams all season long. Mario himself was also not afraid of singing his praises, stating that if I was in college, I'd probably be the #1 pick. Jumping forward to the start of his NBA career, despite all that confidence, it was a rough start. As a rookie, he averaged 6 points, shooting 43% from the field. Numbers that actually look good compared to year 2, where Hezonja put together one of the least efficient full seasons we've seen. Playing 15 minutes a night, he averaged just 5 points, shooting less than 36% from the field and 30% from 3. Now in the following season, we would see him jump to 10 points on 44-34 splits, but he was now a free agent as the Magic had declined to pick up his 4th-year option. He then signed with the Knicks, and over the course of the 2019 season, averaged less than 9 points, shooting 41% from the field.
Hezonja drives it, Middleton, and finishes, and then stares and walks over into the...
He then joined Portland on a minimum deal where he averaged 5 points before being traded to the Grizzlies, where he was waived shortly after. He then returned to Europe, where it was quickly obvious he fit in a whole lot better. He put together really solid years in Greece, then Russia, before returning to Spain with Real Madrid, where he became one of the top players in the league. He played a key role in their 2023 EuroLeague title and is coming off a 2024 season where he was selected to the All-EuroLeague second team, a season that was rewarded with a new 5-year contract extension. What's really interesting about deals like this is that there's this common misconception amongst fans in the States that it's NBA or bust, at least financially. Many don't realize just how big these deals can get. Hezonja's last contract in the NBA with Portland paid him just over $1.8 million a season. This new contract with Madrid will pay Hezonja roughly $2.5 million a season. Another thing of note with Hezonja is that we might not have seen the last. In fact, he included an exit clause in this contract, and it was reported by Shams during the summer that he had been receiving interest from multiple teams to return to the league. At the 6th pick, we saw the Sacramento Kings select Kentucky big Willie Cauley-Stein. The 7-foot junior was coming off a year where he averaged 9 points and 6 rebounds. Numbers that obviously don't stick out, but it was the other end of the court where he was nothing short of dominant. He would take home both SEC and National Defensive Player of the Year. At the NBA level, things started out okay. He averaged 7 and 5 as a rookie, 8 and 5 in his second season, jumped to 13 and 7 in year 3, and then started in all 81 games he played in 2019, averaging 12 points and 8 rebounds. However, while he was proving to be a respectable big at the NBA level, it was blatantly obvious that his ceiling was extremely capped, so come the end of his rookie contract, the market for his services wasn't big at all. He would ultimately sign with the Warriors on just the league minimum. After averaging 8 points and 6 rebounds, he was traded at the deadline to Dallas for a second-round selection. During his first season there, he averaged 5 points and 5 rebounds, but then midway through the following year was waived. Shortly after, he signed a 10-day contract with Philly, but after appearing in just 2 games was waived once again, and that's the last we've seen of him in the NBA. He spent 1 season in the G League, then went overseas and played in Italy this past year, and today is playing in China, where so far, he's played in 2 games averaging 3 points. The 7th overall pick in the draft was made by the Denver Nuggets, who decided to select 6'5" point guard Emmanuel Mudiay, a player that prior to the draft decided to take a pretty unconventional route, especially at the time. After coming out of high school as the 5th ranked recruit in the country, he was set to play at SMU for his freshman season. But over the summer, he decided to change directions and agreed to a 1-year, $1.2 million deal with the Guangdong Southern Tigers in China. There, he would only end up playing in 10 games, averaging 18, 6, and 6. And due to lack of competition, scouts were really not able to get much out of that time. Nearly all his stock in this draft stemmed from the prospect that teams had been scouting prior to him heading overseas. As NBA.com put it at the time, arguably the top pure point guard in the draft who has been on the NBA radar for years. He uses his unique blend of power and quickness to create off the dribble, masterfully shielding defenders to get in the lane and finish in traffic. It won't be until he gets to the NBA that we'll begin to see opposing guards who can consistently match up with him physically. Now, unfortunately, the jump to the NBA didn't go as smooth as scouts expected considering his physical tools. His rookie year was rough to say the least. He averaged just under 13 points and 6 assists, but on atrocious efficiency, 36% from the field, 32% from 3, and even just 67% from the line. Unsurprisingly, that translated to the worst true shooting percentage in the entire league that season, and it didn't get much better in year 2. He went down to 11 points and 4 assists on just as ugly shooting splits. Then in the middle of his 3rd year, he was sent to New York. There we started to see him trend in the right direction. He averaged 15 points and 5 rebounds, shooting 45% from the field and 33% from 3. Far from incredible shooting splits, but really solid compared to what we had seen from him up until that point. He would then sign a deal with the Utah Jazz for the 2020 season, and in 54 games, he averaged just under 16 minutes, 7 points and 2 assists. His efficiency once again continued to trend up as he was now shooting 46% from the field and 35% from 3. But despite that, during the offseason, he would go unsigned. Outside of a brief 2 games and 11 minutes total with the Kings in 2022, that's the last we've seen of him in the NBA. Since then, he's been going back and forth between the G League and overseas. Most recently, he played in Puerto Rico, where across 41 games, he averaged 22, 5, and 6. The 8th overall pick in the draft by the Pistons was Arizona freshman wing Stanley Johnson. Johnson was another prospect that had been on the NBA radar for quite a while. The 6'6" freak athlete came out of high school as a 7th ranked recruit in the country before a freshman season that saw him average 14 points and 7 boards on 45-37 splits. But as we've seen with several top picks from this class, the jump to the NBA ranks was a tough one for Johnson. Across his 73 games as a rookie, he averaged 8 points, shooting only 38% from the field. It would only get uglier in year 2. Despite playing 18 minutes a night, he averaged just 4 points, shooting with even worse efficiency. Year 3 was much of the same, 9 points on 38-29 splits. Then in his 4th season, he was a part of a 3-team deal that sent him to the Pelicans. He was only there for a few months before signing with the Raptors, where he spent 2 seasons, averaging 4 points, shooting 38% from the field. He then signed with the Lakers, where surprisingly he had a pretty big role, even starting in 27 games. He averaged 7 points and 3 rebounds on the best efficiency of his career, 47% from the field. But then following the season, he would be traded to Utah, where he was waived shortly after. He then played 30 games with the Spurs in 2023 before being waived once again. Since then, he spent some time in the NBA G League and is now currently playing over in Turkey. With the 9th overall pick, we saw the Charlotte Hornets grab Frank "The Tank" Kaminsky, a 7-foot big out of the University of Wisconsin, coming off a dominant senior season that saw him average 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists, while shooting 42% from 3. Now, despite him appearing to be one of the more polished scorers in this class at the time of the draft, it wasn't a hot start for Kaminsky. He averaged less than 8 points and 4 rebounds as a rookie. Come his 4th season in Charlotte, not much had changed. He was now averaging 9 points on much better efficiency, but that was far from what the Hornets were looking for when they took him at 9. Come the conclusion of his rookie contract, he would leave Charlotte and join the Phoenix Suns on a 2-year, $10 million deal. He spent 3 seasons there, giving them solid minutes off the bench, averaging 8 points on 47-34 splits. His last season came in 2023, where he started the year off in Atlanta before being traded to the Rockets. Across both teams, he played in 36 games, averaging only 3 points. He spent this past year playing in Serbia, and now this season is in the G League, playing for the Raptors 905. The 10th overall pick was made by the Miami Heat, who went with NCAA champion, 6'6" forward from Duke, Justise Winslow. Winslow was coming off a freshman season where he averaged 13 points and 7 rebounds, shooting 49% from the field and 42% from 3. Now, if it wasn't already blatantly obvious, the 2016 season was rough for most of this rookie class, and Winslow was no different. Despite impressing defensively, we didn't see much at all on the other end. As a rookie, he averaged just 6 points on 42-28 splits. He would then miss most of the following season due to injury, and it really wasn't until year 4 that we started to see a lot more people buy back in. He took on a point forward role, which seemed to be the perfect fit. He averaged 13, 5, and 4 on the best efficiency to date, but unfortunately, his progress would then hit a major roadblock. After only 11 games into the following season, he was sidelined for the rest of the year. He was then traded to the Grizzlies, where after only 21 games, he would once again get shut down due to injury. He would then sign with the Clippers, but was traded midway through the year to Portland. His last season came in 2023, where he played in 29 games, averaging 7 points. Since then, he spent the last 2 years playing in the G League. Now, one of the things that's so interesting about this selection, and really the last few selections in this draft, is what the teams potentially passed on in order to make their selections. Reportedly, the Boston Celtics were extremely high on Justise Winslow, so much so in fact, that they reportedly offered the Charlotte Hornets 4 first-round selections to move up to 9. Not only did they not take that deal, they didn't even take Winslow. We don't know the exact picks Boston offered, but it's hard to imagine had they made that deal, they might be in a much different situation than the one they're in today. Now, that was clearly a rough stretch in this draft to say the least, but luckily, things get a little bit more positive here at 11, where the Pacers select Texas big Myles Turner. Turner was coming off a freshman season where he averaged 10 points, 7 rebounds, and over 2.5 blocks. Numbers that don't jump off the page, but as a prospect, there was plenty to be intrigued about when it comes to Turner. He had great size at 6'11" with a 7'4" wingspan. He was a great athlete, capable of playing both positions in the front court. And while his efficiency from 3 wasn't great, he was a willing shooter from that range, putting a very high ceiling on his game. NBA Draft Room described him as having a rare combination of size, skill, and quickness, gets off the floor quickly, and is a high-level shot blocker. A scouting report that proved to be spot on. Turner had a really solid rookie year, averaging 10 and 6, shooting 50% from the field. Come the end of his rookie contract, he'd become one of the better two-way bigs in the entire league. He averaged 13 points, 7 rebounds, and nearly 3 blocks, while also shooting 49% from the field and 39% from distance. Over the last 6 years since then, he's continued to have a very similar level of success, all while remaining in Indiana. This year, he's averaging 15-7 and over 2 blocks on 49-39 splits. At 12, the Utah Jazz decided to grab Kentucky forward Trey Lyles. Lyles was coming off a freshman season where he averaged only 9 points and 5 rebounds, but as we mentioned with guys like Karl-Anthony Towns, there were just way too many mouths to feed on that Kentucky roster for anyone's production to really stick out too much. Lyles is another guy that had been on the NBA's radar for a while. ESPN stated leading up to the draft that his greatest skill is his high basketball IQ and sweet mid-range game that forces opponents to guard him both facing the basket and on the block. While not an elite rebounder or athlete, he uses his immense skill set to impact the game on both ends of the floor. Now, Lyles would end up getting off to a pretty slow start in Utah. Over his first 2 seasons, he averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds, shooting 40% from the field. Production that made what happens next extremely head-scratching. On the night of the 2017 draft, he'd be traded to the Denver Nuggets. Denver would send the 13th overall pick in exchange for Lyles and the rights to the 24th pick Tyler Lydon. Lydon would go on to play just a total of 26 games in his NBA career, and Lyles only lasted 2 seasons in Denver, while that 13th overall selection would end up becoming Donovan Mitchell, someone who's gone on to be a 5-time All-Star and one of the top guards in the league. Now, since that time in Denver for Lyles, he's been a solid rotational big. He spent 2 seasons with the Spurs, then went to Detroit, and since then has been playing in Sacramento, where he's averaged 7 points and 5 rebounds. The 13th overall pick was made by the Phoenix Suns, who selected the 4th Kentucky Player of the Night, 6'6" shooting guard Devin Booker, a prospect whose draft stock really just doesn't make any sense when looking back. As a freshman, he averaged 10 points, shooting 41% from 3. We've already established that the Kentucky players were held to a different statistical standard, so with that considered, this was solid production. He had great size, clear shot creating talent with the ability to play both on and off the ball, was a knockdown shooter from outside, and he also happened to be the youngest player in the entire class. Almost immediately, it was obvious that letting him fall this far in the draft was a ridiculous mistake. He finished 4th in Rookie of the Year voting, averaging 14, 3, and 3. By his 3rd season, he was averaging 25 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds, shooting 38% from distance. Over the last 7 years since then, he's continued to be mentioned right up there with the top guards in the league. He's become a 4-time All-Star and 2-time All-NBA member. He led the Suns all the way to the finals in 2021, led them to 64 wins in 2022, and while he's experienced some pretty disappointing playoff exits over the last few years, pretty much none of the blame can be put on him. Over the previous 2 seasons, across 15 playoff games, he's averaged 32 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds, shooting 57% from the field and 47% from distance. Absurd. The final pick of the 2015 draft lottery was made by the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that at the time had very serious championship hopes and were looking for an immediate contributor with this selection. Ultimately, Sam Presti decided that player would be 6'2" sophomore point guard coming out of a small program in Murray State, Cameron Payne. It's not hard at all to see why Presti thought that Payne could be an immediate difference maker. While yes, he was coming out of a small program, his production was absurd. He averaged 20 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds, shooting with 46-38 splits. Unfortunately though, the Thunder wouldn't get much at all from Payne outside of hyping up Russell Westbrook pregame. As a rookie, he averaged only 5 points and 2 assists. Then midway through the following season, he was traded to Chicago, where he spent a couple seasons before getting waived. He then signed with the Cavaliers, where he lasted just 20 days. At that time, it was looking like his chances in the league had run out. In fact, in the summer of 2019, he would actually head over to the Chinese League, a transition that's often the point of no return at this stage of a career. But luckily, for Payne, that wasn't the case. He only played 2 seasons in China before heading back to the States to play in the G League, where he dominated. He averaged 23 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds, shooting with 48-37 splits. He had earned himself another shot, this time with the Phoenix Suns ahead of the NBA bubble. During Phoenix's 8 games there, they looked like legitimately one of the best teams in the entire league. They went undefeated, and Cam Payne was actually a significant part of that. He took on a 6-man role, averaging 23 minutes, 11 points, and 3 assists, shooting 49% from the field and 52% from 3. Over the next few years in Phoenix, he would manage to hold on to a pretty similar role, averaging 10 points and 5 assists. Then ahead of last season, he was traded to the Spurs, but was waived prior to the start of the year and signed with the Bucks. He was traded once again at the deadline to the 76ers, where he closed the year averaging 9 points and 3 assists. Ahead of this current season, he joined the New York Knicks, where through 31 games so far, he's averaged 7 points and 3 assists. For Payne, it hasn't been a super notable career by any means, but a really impressive one considering all the ups and downs and the constant change of scenery he's experienced.